What about fears of intimacy? Let's dive into that component a little bit.
Yeah, and so tying into the same of what we're talking about, so we can look at yours. There's fears around the shame piece, the shame of the sexuality. We can also look at that when we talk about insecure attachment styles. So when we're feeling triggered, how we might show up as more anxious or avoidant, disorganized. That's also tied into humans' greatest fear is of abandonment and rejection, because that meant our demise when we think in tribal times and from the evolutionary perspective. If we were kicked out of or rejected from our tribe, that meant there was no chance at survival. And so humans are hardwired to want the acceptance from others. And so a lot of the fear of intimacy is even around that fear of, if I let anyone get too close, they might reject me or abandon me.
I don't know if I understand. I think that's one of those words that I, even myself, sometimes use quite a bit, like abandonment, fear of abandonment. This is going to sound so silly, but would you mind explaining abandonment more and how
Yeah.
like where we get? Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, let's break that down.
Please.
So when I'm talking about, and I will, just briefly reference it, but then I'll talk a more modern time. But when I'm talking about from a tribal perspective, we know that we had to survive together in groups. So whether it was the hunter gatherer, the protection, there was safety in numbers. And so when we're talking about that from a psychology perspective, really being hardwired into us, community and connection. And so then now in modern day times, we think we're so independent and we can do all of these things alone, that we don't need people, when in reality we do. And so that fear still exists. But if we grew up in environments where there was not emotional intimacy and our emotional needs were not taken care of, we develop either this anxious, avoidant, or disorganized response to that. So your attachment style. And so the anxious response to that would be pursuing and really like begging and pleading and fawning and trying to do whatever we can to get that attention. Whereas the avoidance side of that is saying, well, I'm not going to get this anyway, so I just need to figure out how to meet my needs on my own. And so becoming hyper independent. But regardless of what attachment style is developed, the fear is the same of rejection or abandonment. It's just how we're handling it that's different. And so the abandonment can be anything from, your parent leaving as a child, so leaving long term, or when fights would happen, they would maybe leave for short periods of time. You don't know when they're going to come back. But then we carry that with us into adulthood, and we're afraid of the people who we love the most leaving.
Gosh,
does that help at all?
Yeah, it does. And I just sit here thinking, like, yeah, I understand that we have that fear, but the way we express it usually is so twisted.
Oh, for sure. And also depending on your attachment style, because if you tend to be more anxious, then there's the begging and the pleading and the putting up with everything, being a doormat. If you tend to be more avoidant, then it's like, well, whatever, I didn't need you anyway. Or we can go back to the self-sabotaging, and it's pushing people away before they have a chance to leave. So you're right. It's usually a very effed up response to it. But again, survival, we're just trying to figure out the best chance at it.